to stare at me with hollow windows like dead eyes, and the silence of the land pressed down until even my horse trembled beneath me, as if it too felt the weight of sorrow that hung over the place. The closer I came, the more dreadful the sight became, with cracked walls blackened by time, shattered windows like broken teeth, and long vines crawling across its surface like veins of some sleeping corpse. And then I noticed the most horrifying thing: a deep fracture running through the very center of the building from rooftop to ground, a wound upon the house itself, as though earth had cursed it, and when lightning cut through the clouds it revealed the towers sharp and twisted against the storm, their shadows stretching like claws across the darkened ground. At last I stood before the iron gates, rusted and heavy, and as they groaned open the sound echoed like a scream through the empty air, and I could not shake the thought that I was stepping into the grave of a living thing, for this house was not merely stone and wood. It was alive, breathing in silence, and I was about to cross into its heart. I came to answer the desperate letter of an old childhood friend, Roderick Usher, a man once bright and full of life, but when I entered the halls of his family home I found something entirely different, for the air inside was thick with dust, with shadows that seemed to move when I was not looking, and there in the dim chamber, lit only by trembling candles, sat Roderick himself, pale as bone, his skin stretched thin across his face, his hair long and unkempt, his eyes wide with terror that never rested, and his voice shook as he told me of the curse of the house, that it breathed with the lives of those who lived within, that he and his sister Madeline were bound to it, and that neither they nor the house could ever truly die while the other lived. It was then that I saw her, Madeline his twin, who moved like a shadow drifting between worlds, her body frail, her skin pale as death, her silent gaze heavy with despair, and she passed before me like a vision that belonged more to the grave than to the living. Days passed slowly within those walls, each one heavier than the last, and though nothing happened, everything felt alive in silence, as though the portraits of long, dead ancestors watched me with eyes that followed my every move, as though the chandeliers above whispered in the night, as though the very stones of the house groaned beneath the weight of secrets too ancient to bear. The great hall was lined with torn curtains and broken furniture. Cobwebs hung like veils in the corners, and when the wind blew through unseen cracks, it carried with it whispers that chilled my bones. And then the tragedy deepened. Madeline's illness, strange and unexplainable, grew worse until her breath weakened and faded, and one fateful day she was declared dead. With trembling hands, Roderick and I carried her body to a coffin, placing her in the deep vaults below the house, candles flickering as though even the flames feared to remain, and though her face was still and lifeless, I could not rid myself of the thought that her lips were too soft, her skin too warm, her eyes too ready to open. But Roderick insisted she was gone, though his trembling voice betrayed his fear, and so the coffin was sealed, the vault door closed, and the silence of the house grew thicker than ever. That night the heavens opened in fury. A violent storm struck, rain lashing against the broken walls, thunder shaking the earth, lightning flashing through the windows and tearing the shadows apart, while the house groaned like a living beast in pain. Roderick grew restless, pacing like a madman, his eyes wild, his hands trembling, whispering words that froze my blood. "She is not dead," he said, his voice breaking. I hear her in the walls, scratching, struggling to return. And though I tried to calm him, in the pit of my heart I too felt the terror of truth. And then nightmare came alive. With a crash, the doors burst open, and there stood Madeline, no longer in her coffin. Her gown was torn and stained, her skin pale as the grave, her eyes wide with madness and horror, her hands covered in the blood of her struggle. She staggered forward, her breath ragged, her voice a scream that seemed to echo from the dead themselves, and in that final moment she collapsed upon her brother, Roderick, who cried out in terror as the two fell together, lifeless at last, in a final embrace of death and despair. I fled. My heart pounded as I ran through the storm, the wind tearing at me, the rain blinding me, and behind me the House of Usher trembled with its final breath. The deep fracture split wide, the stones broke apart, the towers crashed, and with a thunderous roar the mansion crumbled into the black tarn before it, swallowed by the waters that rose up to devour it whole, and in moments nothing remained but rippling waves under the storm-filled sky. Thus ended the House of Usher, its family, its curse, and its very existence swallowed by the darkness it had carried for centuries. Some houses are not built merely of stone and wood. Some are built of sorrow, of madness, of death itself. And once their time comes, nothing can save them from the shadows that live within.